I'm Jake Sanson. I'm joined by my commentary partners in crime, Jamie Klein and Jens Sobotta, and we're going to talk about what to get excited about in the upcoming 2023 Super GT season. Firstly, Jamie, great to be with you once again. We're going to have a really busy and exciting season in the commentary box, a lot of laps to talk about, a lot of races to come. It's going to be a very interesting one with everything that's now developed.
Yeah, it's great to be back for another season. Of course, starting this week coming up at Okayama with a 300-kilometre race. Always an action-packed venue, a great venue for spectators, and the drivers love it there as well. Plenty of new machinery on the grid, new driver lineups, and even as far as the cars are concerned, we might have an aero freeze, but you wouldn't believe it from seeing some of the new pieces that have appeared on the cars over the winter. So yeah, it's really intriguing. We've had 2 pre-season tests that I'm sure we're going to dig into in much more detail. As to who's looking strong, it's really hard to call as ever, but I think we can look forward to another brilliant 3-way scrap between Japan's big 3 manufacturers, with the added bonus of an amazing GT300 battle to throw into the mix as well.
Absolutely. And Jens, what is it that you're looking forward to most about the 2023 season in Super GT?
It might sound a bit cliche, but I'm actually very much looking forward to the on-track action, because Super GT is such a unique series with multi-class racing. We have GT500, GT300, 3 different car models in GT300 as well. And we have the carbon neutral fuel in the mix this year, and it is so unpredictable. Qualifying and race day can be vastly different, and I think especially with the added tire competition in the series, I think Super GT is such a landmark series, and I can't wait for the season to finally kick off this weekend.
Yeah, it's definitely the most unique sports car series on the planet I know of. I mean, where else can you find a championship where one manufacturer has 3 different cars with 3 different tyre manufacturers? It's an amazing form of racing. We absolutely love it. Coming into the season then for 2023, Jamie, a few changes. We've mentioned it a little bit already, but let's talk about the carbon neutral fuel that's coming in for the 2023 season. Obviously, a very big part of Super GT's focus to reduce its carbon footprint, and it looks like it could have very exciting results already.
Yeah, so this was announced around a year ago. The tie-up with Haltermann Carless and the ETS Racing Fuels brand. So this new second-generation cellulose-based product that they'll be using in both classes. GT300 only from the 3rd race, but GT500 will be using it right from the get-go at Okayama. So there have been different opinions as to who's got the advantage and who's losing out, because all the manufacturers have struggled with a slight loss of power just because of the combustion process is not quite as clean as it were compared to with regular gasoline. It's just a case of fine-tuning the engines to basically deal with a different product, because the engines are essentially the same. They haven't brought in new engines, they're just adapting what they've already got. We're yet to see the full picture about who's looking strongest on the engine front, because testing is always hard to read. A lot of gamesmanship and people on different run plans at different times. So I think when we get to the season opener at Okayama, we will start to get a slightly clearer picture of just how this new fuel is going to impact the competitive order.
It's not the only big change for 2023, Jens. We've also got 5 out of 8 450-kilometre races rather than 300. So clearly we're going to have more on-track activity, more racing and more laps to talk about. So it's obviously going to give the viewer and the competitor more to do out on track this year.
Yeah, this is very exciting, because not just do we get a second endurance race with 450 kilometers at Suzuka for the first time, we're also getting an endurance race at Autopolis, a fan-favorite circuit, a very beautiful circuit, goes up and down through nature and in Kyushu, and it will be very fascinating, because Autopolis is known to be hard on the tires and the material. And speaking of the tires, 1 tire set less this year, and this is part of the roadmap that the GTA chairman, the governing body of Super GT, Masaki Bando, presented last year. They want to reduce the carbon dioxide emission by 50% until 2030, and the carbon neutral fuel with less tire sets available is just one of the first steps towards that future. And I think it's very interesting, because normally if you want to be environmentally friendly, you want to reduce the track time. But in case of Super GT, they're actually increasing it and forcing the hand of the manufacturers to say, look, you need to build parts engines, tires, whatever, that last actually longer. And I think that's a very interesting approach, and I can't wait to see how all of this is going to play out.
Now, one of the biggest regulation changes for Super GT in 2023, Jamie, is, of course, regarding tyres. We love the fact that there is a inter-team and inter-manufacturer tyre war in Super GT. But this year, the teams are going to have fewer sets available over the course of a weekend. Just tell us how this is going to work and how we think this is going to impact the racing.
Yeah, so essentially in dry weather, they'll be going from 6 sets of tyres for the weekend to 5. Essentially, it means that a team has to kind of go a little bit all in on their tyre selection because, of course, weeks in advance they decide, they look at the weather forecast, they obviously refer to the previous data, and the tyre manufacturers together with the teams have to decide which tyres they're actually going to bring. So the more sets you have, the more options you kind of give yourself to cover off more possibilities. If it's warmer than you expect, if it's colder, if there's something unexpected that comes up, if it doesn't work with your setup or, you need to change course. Basically, this will make it harder for teams to change course midweekend because they'll only be able to bring 2, let's say, alternate sets. Before they had three of one plan, 3 of the sort of plan B. Whereas now they're going to be much more restricted, and teams that don't get it right the first time are really going to struggle to execute the weekend with only 2 sets of their lesser preferred compound. I mean, some teams even said, well, we're only going to bring 1 compound of we're just going to go completely, just bet the farm that what we think is best will be the best. So different teams coming with different approaches. So that's going to translate into even more variability, I think, over the course of the season.
So with that in mind, obviously that's going to be a really big change in terms of the format of a race weekend. Jens Sobotta, how big a difference do we think this is actually going to make in how the races themselves play out?
Well, I think that the teams on the best tires, and the best tire to have right now in GT500 at least is Bridgestone and Michelin. I think they should be fine, but for Yokohama and Dunlop, this might actually be tough because those were the ones that were struggling, at least in the race. We've seen the Yokohama teams, especially the Wet Sports Bando Toyota team, being super strong in qualifying. In race that Yokohama rather was lacking a little bit of pace. But I think, as Jamie said, you have to make your choice quite early, actually. The same goes for the wet tires. You can only have 1 wet tire specification this year, and the deadline to announce this to the GTA is already passed, and they all developed a new wet tire after getting beaten by Michelin's very innovative wet tire last year at the Sportsland Sugo round. Very interesting to see how this is going to play out, but I think the tire competition will actually be more fierce because of the reduced tire sets.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the calendar for the 2023 season. Obviously, we kick off this weekend at Okayama, the former Grand Prix venue in 1994 and 1995. That's kicking off with its 300-kilometer race this weekend. And then there is a wait of another 3 weeks before we get into the next battle on the circuit, which will be on the Fuji Speedway for the Fujimaki Group Fuji GT 450-kilometer race. And that is a midweek race rather than a weekend race. Very unusual for that, but it's very unique to the Super GT Championship, kind of a holiday that week, and so it's the Motor Racing Festival as far as we're concerned. Then a month later, we go to Suzuka for the first of the 450-kilometer races there, and then we have Fuji once again, but after 2 months of waiting, the first weekend of August. 3 weeks later, it's back to Suzuka, then we go to September, and the Sugo race, 300 kilometers at Sportsland Sugo. That'll be an interesting one as always. Then to Autopolis on the third weekend of October, the 14th and 15th, and then the season finale, once again at the Mobility Resort in Motegi for the 300 kilometer. It is a very aggressive calendar, Jamie. It's always going to provide us with plenty of exciting racing, and I have a feeling that this year, with there being 5 out of 8 450 kilometer races, it's going to be tougher than ever before.
Yeah, I think the good thing about the 450-kilometer race format is that it just allows more strategy, because we see in the 300-kilometer races, all the teams now have got the fuel mileage to the stage where they can pretty much pit around the 1/3 distance minimum, and we don't see too much variation. But with the 450k race, you've got to make 2 stops, so 2 fuel stops are mandatory. but you don't have to change tyres both times. You can actually get away with only one tyre change. And we did see a couple of teams attempt that last year, although not successfully, it should be said. But it was interesting to see them try. And of course, the tyre manufacturers will have been working on this year's tyres with that in mind. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the 450k races in particular, just because we've had that extra unpredictable element. And just in general, a longer race, apart from, more track action for us to enjoy, it just means, more changing conditions that change the relative speed of cars over the course of the race, and more chances for a team to come back from an early problem or bad qualifying. So it's a really great format, and I hope we actually see it adopted across the board in future.
I quite agree. I think it really does bring great change to Super GT moving forward. Obviously, we've got to talk about the lineups for 2023, so we'll kick off by looking at Nissan. It's going to be very much a season of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's no major changes to the driver lineup at all. So obviously, Jens, I guess from Nissan's point of view, they've obviously got a great unit of drivers there. You've got those fantastic combinations, Kazuki Hidamine and Bertrand Baguette, of course, at Impul. And you've got some great strength and solidarity with Daiki Sasaki and Kohei Hirate at Kondo. And it is going to be a very, very smooth season in terms of transition. Not a lot changing. Obviously, Katsumasa Chiyo and Mitsunori Takaboshi still at NDDP, the number 3 car. So from their point of view, it is very much business as usual.
Yeah, it's actually unusual because this is for the first time since 2015 that they haven't made any changes to their driver roster. And the new Nissan Z that debuted last year immediately won the championship. It was quick, and Impul won the championship for the very first time since 1995. So that was a huge deal, and thankfully the blue car with Bertrand Baguette and Kazuki Hiramine is back on track with a slightly different name, not Calsonic anymore, but Marelli. So this is something that the fans, especially the legacy fans, have to get used to. The Calsonic name is still on the car, a bit hidden, but it's still on the car itself. But interestingly enough, Nissan itself, they don't think that any of the carryover advantages actually, or rather the advantages that they had last year, won't necessarily carry over to this season. They even said, despite some rumors, that they are the best in using that new carbon neutral fuel, that they don't really have an advantage there to make use of it. And I mean, it is different for all three manufacturers, but they don't really see themselves in an advantage role. And unlike Toyota and Honda, they didn't make any changes to their bodywork, at least from what we've seen at the pre-season test, Jamie.
Yeah, it was interesting speaking to the Nissan's executive director, Matsumura-san, who sort of said, oh yeah, well, we were a bit surprised to see the other manufacturers have actually changed things because there is an aero freeze. We've got new cars on the way in 24. We've already seen the Honda Civic GT500 concept, which we'll come on to in a bit. So, they're busy developing those cars, and the idea is to save them the cost of having to do 2 simultaneous development programs. So the aero is frozen. However, we've seen Toyota and Honda interpret this slightly differently, and I think that has taken Nissan a little bit by surprise because they, as Jens mentioned, they haven't changed anything, at least that's visible to us. So yeah, it's interesting from that perspective, and certainly Bertrand Baguette and Kazuki Hiramine, I know they're trying not to. They've got the number 1 on the car, but they're trying to still see themselves as challengers and not think of themselves as the favourites. And by the way, I'm definitely still mourning the loss of the Calsonic logo. I still haven't quite gotten over.
Well, I suppose there's a little bit of heritage still, because obviously you've still got, as we mentioned, the driver lineup still saying as they are. Sugio Matsuda and Ronnie Quintarelli are still in the number 23. The Kondo is still number 24. Yes, the Calsonic logo's gone. But yeah, the only real blip, I suppose, really in the driver market front, Jamie, coming into 2023. Dare we mention Fujinami Gate briefly before we really touch on it in race commentary next weekend?
Yeah, well, if we don't mention it now, then we'll have to say it while the cars are pounding around on track. So let's get out of the way now. Yeah, so there's no Kyoto Fujinami in the Nissan roster in GT500 or GT300. So he, of course, is the 2-time champion in GT300 alongside João Paulo de Oliveira, including last year. He's been touted for a promotion to GT500 for quite a while, basically since the first time he won the title in 2020. He's driven the 500 car on a number of occasions, the most recent of which came at Suzuka in January, where he was piloting the number 24 Kondo racing car. And at that time, it appeared, and according to my information, it had been pretty much decided that he was going to step up to join Daiki Sasaki in that car. And then there was a last-minute change, and then when they finally announced the lineups, and I know of one other driver who will remain nameless, they said they choked on their cornflakes when they saw that Fujinami was nowhere to be seen on that press release. And I was actually at Daytona at the time, covering the Rolex 24, and it was very late in the evening, and I had my story ready to go and knew a Nissan announcement was coming, and I had to throw it in the bin and start again while there was a session going on 2 minutes late. So yeah, that's how sure I was that Fujinami was going to be there, and he wasn't. So, of course, Nismo has not really said why in any detail. The only official information that we have is that Fujinami posted an apology to his Twitter account shortly after the announcement, and that according to Nissan, they were not able to sign a contract with him at the time. And basically, this is because he had some kind of legal wrangling hanging over his head at the time, involving a violent incident, let's say, with one of his drivers from KF Motorsport, which is a team that runs in the Vita Pro series, which is a sort of clubman level championship in Japan. So Fujinami in a kind of coaching role. Apparently there was some, disagreement with one of his drivers that got a bit nasty, and I don't know exactly how bad it was in that sense, but it was bad enough to cast a cloud over him. And basically, once this was resolved, it was too late for him to get the seat. But once it was resolved, he was given the olive branch of a reserve contract by Nissan. So now he is back in the family, kind of, as the reserve driver. And he was in the paddock at Okayama and Fuji for the pre-season tests, looking a bit sort of forlorn. I saw him, sort of chatting to drivers up and down the paddock, almost as if he didn't have too much to do, bless him. So hopefully he can get something out of this year. He's not been completely exiled from Nissan. He's still around. And, we know he's a great talent, and he definitely deserves to be brought back into the fold at some point in the future.
I can't help but find parallels between this story and Daniel Ricciardo returning to Red Bull in Formula One, but that's kind of a different conversation, maybe for another time. So we'll put a pin in that one, and maybe we'll come back during a red flag at some point over the course of the year, and we'll pick that story up again. Let's talk about Honda. Obviously, this is the last year for the NSX GT. There is a bit of a driver lineup change across the board, but there is now an ARTA Mugen super team, essentially, because they've now got a union and two-car squad, Nojiri and Oyu in the number 8 and Fukuzumi and Otsu in the number 16. Obviously, Estemo still have a strong lineup in Matsushita and Tsukukoshi. We also have the Nakajima car, which has Takuya Izawa and Kakunoshin Ota, who is stepping up to GT500 in 2023. And then the Kunimitsu car of Naoki Yamamoto and Tadasuke Makino. Yes, this is an exciting lineup for Honda. Obviously, this is the swan song for the NSX GT, but it looks like Honda really, really wants to bow out with the title, because this is a bit of a revolution in their driver lineup.
Yeah, ideally, if you want to retire the NSX GT, Honda's legendary sports car, you do want to get that GT500 title. And by the way, on a note, I'm very excited for that Civic. I think it looks fantastic. But yeah, this new ARTA Mugen super team is very exciting, because until last year, ARTA was actually working with a maintenance garage called Servus Japan together, which were technically doing the operation on the technical level and everything on the race weekends. That is gone. They're not doing that anymore. They joined forces with MTech, the company behind Team Mugen, and they're now, as you mentioned, running two cars. Two cars, of course, you can collect more data, you can share the data between those cars, and this should actually be of an advantage for them. But personally, I'm very excited for that first lineup you mentioned, Tomoki Nojiri and Toshiki Oyu. I think two drivers who couldn't be any more different. You have Nojiri. He's now a two-time Super Formula champion. He's very calm, very humble, very analytical, great setup builder. He can fine-tune your setup in detail. And in fact, there was a couple of years ago an anonymous questionnaire in the paddock where engineers, mechanics, but also some drivers were asked, hey, who do you think is actually the best GT500 driver? And Nojiri was a name that came up quite often. On the other hand, you have Oyu, a bit of an eccentric character, but I mean that in a very positive way because I do like characters in motorsport. A very aggressive driver. I would say he's a bit more aggressive than Nojiri. Super fast. He did an unofficial lap record at Suzuka during winter testing, and I'll bet with 120% perfect conditions, but he burned it down basically so that everyone had to check the timesheets and be like, wait, did you seriously set that time? So he's a rising superstar, very fast, won his first year in Super Formula, actually, the JF Grand Prix in Suzuka, a very prestigious race. And this combination of Nojiri and Oyu, I'm very excited. And if ARTA can actually sort out the issues they had last year, I mean, they did win the Golden Week Fuji race, which was, considering the circumstances, a bit lucky. But outside of that, only P12 in the rankings. So it was a very tough year for them. But if they can actually sort those issues out, and with 2 cars, you would think that they can do that, then I think this combination, the number 8 car, might actually have a good shot at the title. Because now Oyu is on tires that are actually competitive with Bridgestone.
I mean, what do you think about this, Jamie? This is quite a daring change of things for Honda, considering it is the last year. Is this... From your point of view, is this Honda basically saying we're going all out to win the title, so let's go for a gamble?
I wouldn't call it a gamble, because I think Mugen is an upgrade on Service Japan. They're Fence Service Japan. They're a very respectable organisation, and they're helping Team Kinomitsu. The chief engineer Hoshi-san is one of the best engineers of recent times, but for whatever reason, it wasn't working on the sort of operational, procedural level. The too many mistakes over the last couple of seasons, too many points squandered. I mean, they're actually quite close to winning the championship in 21, but, just too many mistakes. The Sugo race where they got, I think, 4 penalties in succession, which was just jaw-dropping at the time. So from that perspective, of course, Mugen as well, they've been desperate to have Bridgestone tyres for a while. They were on Yokohama's when Yokohama's were bad. They were on Dunlops when, Dunlops were bad, which is pretty much, recent history except maybe 2020. So they're finally getting their hands on the tyre that actually allows you to be consistent across all conditions and all tracks. So I don't think it's a gamble in that sense. I'd say if there was any element of gambling, it might be pairing Nojiri with Oyu, because, as you mentioned, Jens, they're so diametrically opposed characters. And that chemistry is quite important when you consider the GT500 lineups. It isn't necessarily about how quick each driver is individually. It's about how they work together, how their setup preferences match with each other. And just their personalities. I mean, I think one of the reasons that Baguette and Hiramine work so well is just that they're great mates, and they just bounce off each other, and there's that amazing energy inside the team, and that just lifts the whole mood of the camp. So, so that's something we have to wait and see, because you don't, in pre-season testing, there's no pressure, and we're not going to really know how that works until we're in the white heat competition, and there is something on the line, and people are going to get upset if mistakes are made. Especially, I think Oyu is the kind of character that is going to demand perfection from his team. So that's going to be interesting. But as far as the actual Mugen ARTA union goes, I think that was just a logical move all round.
Fair play. So that's going to be really interesting to observe over 2023 over at Honda. Finally, in GT500, we've got the Toyota camp. Now, this is fascinating to observe. In the rookie car, we have Oshima and Yamashita. We have the Bando car of Konomoto and Sakaguchi. But it's all a shake-up elsewhere. Tachikawa and Nishira in the Zensuroma and Sakaguchi and Nakayama in the Sard car. But at Tom's, it's been a proper shuffle of the deck. Shota Tsuboi is now alongside Ritamo Miyata, and Giuliano Alesi is joined by the new Toyota incumbent, Ukyo Sasahara. This is a fascinating development over the winter, Jens, because, of course, last year, Ukyo Sasahara was a Honda golden boy, winning 2 races in Super Formula, and now here he is in Super GT with Toyota. How times change.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying someone else's loss is someone else's win. And in case of Ukyo Sasahara, he seemed to be a bit disappointed with his standing inside Honda. As you mentioned, he won 2 Super Formula races, couldn't get a full-time cockpit for this year, so he looked elsewhere, and he's now with Toyota. And what better team to join than Team Toms? I mean, they are pretty much the flagship team of Toyota in the last couple of seasons. And he's now in the 37 car, which doesn't have the key pair sponsoring anymore, but Deloitte, a new sponsor that comes with Giuliano Alesi. And it's actually very spicy that he's teaming up with Alesi, because those two did have somewhat of a shootout in Super Formula of who gets the second Tom's cockpit, which then went to Alesi for several reasons, not just because of speed or anything. But now they're working together, and they have to work together. And Sasahara, despite new to the team, new to Honda, he has more GT500 experience than Alesi, so he is the ace driver, and he will be responsible for setups and everything. While Alesi, he was a bit struggling last year. I mean, he's actually way faster than he showed last year. I mean, he was in GT300 working with the Arto Thailand team and hived them to new heights that they haven't known before, and then was struggling in his first year in GT500. You have to adapt. Even a Nick Cassidy, a phenomenal driver, he had to learn how to drive in GT500, how to manage the traffic and everything. I remember his engineer Tsutomu Tojo saying he loses time in traffic. He managed to get better than that, and he became a champion eventually. So I think him working together with Sasahara, quite interesting, and I'm very excited to see how all of this is going to play out between those two, and especially Sasahara, who has now found a new home. And also that internal duel between the 36 and the 37 car, who will actually be better, because in recent seasons, I mean, the 36 car was a bit better. I mean, they won the championship in 2021, so yeah, let's see how this is going to play out. It stays unpredictable.
Speaking of unpredictability, Jamie, with Toyota, we got to ask a sort of a subtle question coming into the season. Looking at how sporadic their form was last year, there were some races where the Toyota was the car to have, and there were other races when it looked like they just couldn't get a decent lap together, either in qualifying or a race stint. You've got to ask, coming into 2023, is the Supra on the back foot to a certain extent?
Yeah, I mean, this was the impression in the winter private testing. Toyota was quite slow, to be honest. I mean, they were consistently at the bottom of the timesheets in the tests in the group tests that they did. Honda, of course, was looking by far the strongest, with the caveat that colder conditions mean more downforce that you don't necessarily get during a race weekend. But even so, the gap was such that Toyota drivers were massively playing down their prospects. However, I would say one sort of preliminary conclusion maybe with the carbon neutral fuel is that maybe that's put Toyota back in the game a little bit. Again, we still don't really know exactly how much the different manufacturers are struggling or not struggling with the new fuel. But yeah, at the Okayama test, the first preseason test, the official preseason test, that is, the Toyotas were, yeah, they're in the ballpark, whereas they hadn't been before. So the main, the main differentiator there was the fact that it was all carbon neutral fuel, whereas before it was mostly on regular fuel with the occasional sprinkling of carbon neutral fuel just for sort of back-to-back comparisons. And I think the 36 car, the other Tom's car, so that's the white and orange AU liveried machine, showed Tsuboya Tomiata. I think for my money, probably the two best drivers in the Toyota stable right now. I think they've surpassed the number 14 car, in my opinion. I don't think, Sasahara is obviously new to Toyota. Alesi, as we touched upon, struggled a lot last year, still got a lot of learning to do. Yuki Sekiguchi is just up and down like a yo-yo. Saw that in Super Formula last weekend as well. So yeah, I think we're going to be looking towards Tsuboya and Miata to lead the Toyota charge. I wouldn't be surprised to see them win at Okayama just because the Supra usually does well there. For whatever reason, I think perhaps the fact that it's a very it's a slow speed track with a lot of tight turns, and the Supra's got a shorter wheelbase, so that tends to help. But in terms of the whole calendar, I haven't seen too much evidence that we're going to see them strong at Suzuka. Fuji's always a good one for them because of the straight line factor, but I think there's still some doubts. And the fact we're going to end the season at Motegi again, don't forget, Motegi is where it really counts, because the success ballast comes off there, is where the title is decided. If you have a bad race at Motegi, I mean, usually we go into the final race with 5 or 6 cars all still in contention. So you can't afford to drop the ball there, or you have to go there with a huge advantage and just hang on. But that doesn't usually happen just because of the way the championship's structured. So, yeah, I think they're going to have to really maximise their strengths at Okayama and Fuji, and then hope that they're kind of still in the ballpark enough at the other tracks, just pick up some good points. And yeah, I think Tsuboy and Miyata will be the ones to hopefully be in the mix come the end of the season.
GT500 is certainly going to be fascinating in 2023. I'm well aware of the fact that we are running very short on time, and obviously we've got an entire GT300 grid to talk about, so we're going to have to do it in brief, unfortunately. You'll have to tune into the races yourself on motorsport.tv's premium service to get a little bit more meat on the bone for GT300 this coming weekend for Okayama. But we can talk about it in brief. APR have obviously ditched the Prius, and now they're going with the Lexus LC500H, which is a very interesting change for them. They'd had the Prius since 2012, so obviously it's a big change for them. Pacific have ditched the Ferrari. They now have the Mercedes-AMG GT3 for this year, and the Toyota 86, the Team Mac car, that is now going to be running the Lexus RCF GT3. Everything else is pretty much a standard. ARTA not running a GT300 class car this year, focusing purely on the double effort in GT500. There's a few driver changes worth picking up on as well. The BMW team study car is now going to bring in Bruno Spengler as the BMW factory driver, partnering Seiji Ada. There's a bit of a change up in the Gainer lineup because Yasuda is now going to be alongside Okusa, and Ishikawa is now going to be alongside Tomita, so they've shuffled the lineup a little bit there. Igor Fraga, the former Gran Turismo World Series champion, is now going to be racing this year. And Miki Koyama, who is the former regional Japanese champion, she is going to be the first woman to race in the series for 11 years, as she will be the third team driver at Adest Iwata Racing. So that's all pretty exciting. You've also got the likes of Tepe Notori returning with Kondo Racing. He's actually the driver who's going to replace Kyoto Fujinami in the Kondo Nissan in GT300. And there's not going to be any Drago course in 2023 either. So that's pretty much sorted out some of the big movers and shakers. Jens, coming into the GT300 series, who's your tip for success? Who do we think we're going to see towards the front?
Oh gosh, I think it would be easier to tell you the lottery numbers for this.
I mean, yeah, last year we did have 8 different cars winning 8 different races.
It is a highly competitive class, and usually you have around 8-10 cars who actually can win races and win for the championship. But of course, you do have the reigning champions of Kondo Racing. They won the title twice in the last 3 years. That's a statement. And Joe Paulo Oliveira, now joined by Tepe Notori, as you said, the 2021 Super Formula Lights champion. That's definitely going to be a lineup that's going to win 4 wins and for the title for sure. You have the blue boxer, the Subaru BRZ with Takuto Iguchi and Hideki Yamauchi. Yamauchi being the king of qualifying. I mean, 8 pole positions in the last 60 races. That's a statement. It didn't always translate to their race pace, but being quick in qualifying does mean a lot, especially in GT300 with so many cars involved. And the other lineup, the Gainer lineup that you mentioned of Yasuda and Okusa and the number 10 car, that's Sensei and student now working together. I'm very excited for this because Yasuda is the mentor of Okusa, and he actually was the one that told him, look, if you want to make it in GT racing, try Super Taikyu. Don't go Formula 4. Try Super Taikyu. Learn how to race with a car with a roof on your head, basically, and learn the multi-class racing. And he came to Super GT last year, rookie sensation. He came to Motegi. He had a legit shot at the title. Didn't work out, but that's very exciting. And yeah, personally, I'm also very much looking forward to Miki Koyama, as you mentioned, the first woman actually to win an FIA-sanctioned mixed junior Formula series last year in the Formula Regional Japan series. So very happy to finally have a woman again in Super GT. I hope she can be a trailblazer for more young female racers coming to Super GT or other categories.
So it's very, very exciting to see all these developmental changes. Jamie, who's your tip for success in GT300 in 2023? Who have you got your eye on?
Well, I'm feeling a bit more bold than Jens in declaring my favourite. Before I mention that, though, Miki Koyama has not passed her rookie test yet. So
Never did.
So she does that before her first planned appearance at Fuji for round 2. But yes, So we only really have the Okayama pre-season test to go on because Fuji was wet and half the cars didn't run. In fact, there are a bunch of cars that didn't run like at all on the second day because they were just too concerned about having a shunt. In fact, the 25 Hoppy Skier Supra did have a shunt, but they're luckily on course to repair that for this weekend's race. But I was pouring through the long run data, and the car that stood out head and shoulders above anybody else was the number 65 Leon Racing Mercedes. Amazing long run pace, like unbelievably metronomic and just clearly better than anybody else. There were some other cars that were not bad, and certainly the other Bridgestone tyre cars are all strong. So that's the number 2 Motor Racing Inging Toyota plus the Saitama Toyota Green Brave car. The APR Lexus maybe is a bit more of an unknown because the car is just so new. So I'm not going to call that a favourite or anything, although I'm looking forward to seeing it at certain tracks later in the year that they're confident about, like Suzuka. But the Leon car, it always goes well at Okayama, and this year you don't have to change your tyres. You can go the whole race on one set. That's a change from last year. Likewise for the final race of the year at Motegi, and that car is good at both of those tracks. So combined with the fact that they just had amazing long run pace with Naoya Gamo and Takuro Shihara at the wheel, I'm going to stick my neck out. Okay, it's unpredictable. Things can go wrong like they did. I remember they had that disastrous pit stop at Fuji last year, which cost them really badly in the end. But if you're looking just at who is the quickest and who's got the tools to do the job with the Bridgestone tyres combined with the rule change and the Mercedes as well. I mean, the Good Smart Mercedes is looking fairly decent as well. But I think just the Bridgestone tyres are going to put the Leon crew at a slight advantage. So I'm going to say we've not had a foreign car, a non-Japanese car win the championship in quite a few years. Nissan obviously has been dominant lately, Subaru getting a title as well, Honda in 2019. So I think you have to go back to 2018 when Leon won it the last time. So I think it could be their turn again. But yeah, let's wait and see if they're as strong as they look like they should be in the first race this weekend.
It's going to be a fascinating opener at Okayama. Do tune in, ladies and gentlemen. Motorsport.tv will be live for both qualifying on Saturday and the race on Sunday. We cannot wait to get started with the 2023 season. Last year had 8 different winners from 8 races in GT300, 7 different winners out of 8 in GT500, the most competitive sports car championship in the world. Whatever your plans are for the early hours of the morning if you're watching in Europe, then cancel them. Super GT is absolutely what you need to be glued to this weekend. From all of us here at Motorsport.tv, from myself, Jake Sanson, from my colleagues Jamie Klein and Jens Sobotta, thanks very much for watching this preview, and we are getting ourselves ready in the commentary box for another gripping season of Super GT. From all of us here, sayonara.